From a shifting political landscape to the future of creativity itself, this week has been a game changer for retail. G'day everyone, it's Mal Chia here, back with episode 86 of This Week in E-commerce. Now, it has been a hell of a week with the dust settling on the Australian federal election. I myself had 3 democracy sausages, mine plus my 2 kids, and a lot is going to be changing in the world over the next few weeks. And I think what you probably saw on the weekend was a big rebuke of what we're seeing in the United States, particularly with the Trumpian politics, this move towards ultra right-wing nationalism, conservative values, really a push against that. And hopefully a sign that we are moving to a much more understanding, much more caring, much kinder society, which is focused on inclusion. That is my hope from what has happened in Australian politics, that we're going to be putting away some of the discord we've been seeing over the last couple of months. Because that's what we're going to need, because things are getting much more difficult, as we know, with everything that's happening in the tariffs. And we're seeing that change happening all around the world, in the stock market, to even what's happening with Meta and more. But I'm going to dig into the politics side of things and really talk about what this potentially means for the retail sector. Look, and I think all in all, the impacts are going to be fairly minimal because there were no real policies which are going to impact retail to a massive degree. I know from a small business perspective, the most significant thing to come out of this is that there will be the instant asset write-off for a further 12 months. So if you are going to make a capital purchase of $20,000, you can write that off straight away. Fantastic. But also with some short-term energy credits as well, which is a much needed move, considering that energy has been one of the things which has been driving up the operational costs of a lot of retailers over the last several years. But aside from that, there's not really a whole lot in there for retail. From the consumer point of view, there is going to be some cost of living relief. So we will see some modest tax cuts from July. This should allow us to have some temporary boosts in consumer spending, but I wouldn't say it will be too much because I think there's so many other strains on household budgets that I can't imagine people going out there and spending a lot, particularly on goods which aren't necessary. So those things which are truly discretionary. And even when you look across the landscape at which brands are struggling the most, it's the ones who don't have something which is necessary, something which solves a problem in people's lives. A couple of clients of mine who are selling products which are genuinely painkillers have actually seen their sales continue to grow over this last several months. Shout out to eShopping Group. But with other brands who have products which are more of a nice to have, whether it be fashion, skincare, or fragrances, they're not really seeing a lot of that growth over that period because people are still wondering, do I really need this? And they are thinking twice about whether they will go and buy something. And these tax cuts which are coming aren't going to really help that because everyone has seen their cost of living rise significantly. So I think a lot of that spend is going to go back towards just making sure you can cover your bills. But even with workplace as well, in terms of hiring, where we've seen a lot of skill shortages in the market over the last several years, there will be continued investment into free TAFE, hopefully, and further workforce development to address some skill shortages. But again, we're starting to see that will take many years to be able to play out. And also with some of the migration policy changes, some of that is probably going to slow down the rates of migration to the country, again, which is possibly going to constrain retail staffing. So in terms of immediate relief, I'm not expecting to see much happening from this election win. While I'm pleased about it, I don't think it's really going to change too much in terms of how retailers are doing it at the moment. There's a lot more from a macroeconomic level, which we're going to need to look at, but possibly potentially exploring new markets as well. So whether there are some free trade agreements to come, whether it be with countries like the UK or Europe, or potentially deepening our ties with China and exporting more to China. We'll wait and see with that. Because I think this is where, with America stepping out of the global limelight, China has now had been handed a huge opportunity to come in and take that role which America once played. So we'll see what happens over the coming weeks and months. Because one company which has really benefited over this last period is Microsoft, where Microsoft recently have become the world's most valuable company. With a valuation of $3.235 trillion, they are now more valuable than Apple, who finished last week at 3.07 trillion. Now, it hasn't really come as much of a surprise because Microsoft has consistently outperformed the market all year, especially in contrast to Apple, who have actually underperformed, where their shares have actually traded fairly weakly all year round because of the fact that their income has actually remained fairly stagnant, whereas Microsoft sales have continued to grow and grow and grow. However, the last couple of months with the tariffs have really exposed where Apple's weaknesses could be, mainly that they rely on an overseas supply chain. So with the additional tariffs coming in from China and other countries, you can see that Apple's cost of goods will be increasing, which means that that's going to flow onto consumers with the ultimate price continuing to increase. Whereas Microsoft, the fact that they are purely software, or at least largely software now, means that they're relatively unaffected by this. And they've also continued to grow quite a lot in this period. And a lot of this has come through the fact that they've invested so heavily in AI, where AI is now really their calling card, whether it be through their investment into OpenAI, but also Microsoft Copilot as well, and how that's being baked in more and more into all their products. And while I am primarily a Google and Apple user, from what I understand from friends who do use Copilot, they say it's pretty fantastic and it's actually helped them do their jobs a lot more effectively now. So I think Microsoft are going to continue to strengthen their hold in the market as what we're seeing at the moment. And I'd expect, given that they're relatively unaffected by Donald Trump's tariffs, will continue to be the most valuable company in the world for some time, perhaps until Apple resolves some of their issues, which will take many months or years potentially to come if they are going to be looking to bring back onshore manufacturing, which instantly made me think about all the AI-generated videos going around of Trump and Elon Musk sitting there soldering parts together on a chip. But anyway, I completely digress. Now, last week as well, I had the great pleasure of attending a couple of fantastic Meta events. The first one was on Wednesday, which is their Meta Festival, which I believe was the first time they hosted Meta Festival here in Australia. And then Thursday, I had the pleasure of speaking at the Meta offices. On the Wednesday Meta Festival, though, the event was a huge event. It was held in Sydney. There were about 1,000 or so people there, and a really well-produced event, as you would expect from Meta, where they ran through a lot of workshops across all the different parts of the Meta advertising stack, in particular, talking about AI, talking about media buying, talking about creativity and cross-border in this day and age and what brands needed to do before moving into a series of keynotes later that afternoon. It was a really well-run event, which highlighted more than anything else, the huge investment into AI, but also wearables as well. I had the pleasure of wearing some of the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and I got to say, while I knew for a 45-minute keynote I was 100% being sold to, I am still going to go out and buy one of these because they are pretty damn cool. Because you can wear them, they look completely unobtrusive, unlike some of the previous wearables before. You could wear them out and about because I wear glasses already. No one would even bat an eyelid. But just with a simple command like Meta, take a photo, it would be able to take a photo. I could look at a picture or look at a building. It could tell me everything about that building. And that was something which I thought, this is pretty cool. But the thing that got me over the line was watching a chef demonstrate how they use it. Whereas they're cutting ingredients or when they're looking at the fridge, they can ask a question and Meta would recommend a recipe to cook. And as they're preparing, they could ask further questions and it would continue to respond, but also creating point of view content as well, which is becoming increasingly popular in the ad space. They're a pain in the ass to create. So being able to create it from Meta glasses was pretty cool. But again, I digress. AI was really the name of the game in terms of how much Meta was now investing into the AI space. And as you'd imagine, it's been pretty significant. We've seen that a lot in terms of how the Meta ad platform has continued to evolve over the last couple of years through Advantage Plus audiences, Advantage Plus creative, Advantage Plus placements, and also the Advantage shopping campaigns. They are everywhere now in terms of how AI is so deeply baked into the product. And you can see that for the most part, it actually has a net positive effect on your advertising. I've seen that multiple times on many ad accounts which I oversee and manage. So I can say hand on heart that the AI does actually work for the majority of cases. And this is reflected in their results as well, where last quarter, Meta announced that they have posted $42 billion worth of sales, which is $1 billion more than what that was originally forecast. As a result, their share price has gone through the roof. They have more users than ever before. I believe the number was 3.3 billion monthly active users, which is almost half the world who are using a Meta platform at some way, shape, or form, which is phenomenal results when you see how impactful this company is and what sort of presence it has. But there was one story, though, which came out at the same time last week off the back of the earnings report, which did prick up and have me a little bit concerned. And that while I'm overall very bullish about how important Meta is for advertisers, as you'd imagine, one concern, though, is Mark Zuckerberg announcing his vision for infinite creative, where the goal, he is saying, is that for businesses just to have a credit card and an idea and to leave everything else to Meta. What he's saying is that with the systems which they're building now, with all the generative AI capabilities, is that very soon he's expecting that Meta will be able to do all that for you. Will be able to do your messaging, will be able to do your creative strategy, and then create an infinite number of creative variations to be able to achieve your result. Now, this sounds to some people like nirvana. It sounds an amazing result because something which came out of the session which I ran on Thursday at the Meta offices was how big a pain point creative is for the majority of brands, and that they are really struggling to keep up with the creative volume required to make the most out of the advertising platforms. And I agree, you do need a lot of creative, but I don't think ceding everything to the AIs is the answer. But that's what Mark Zuckerberg feels is the answer, where a human will no longer have much input into what is going to be created, and the AI will just go out and create different variations. And those variations will be expected to sell. But the problem with this, though, is that the AI doesn't understand things about brand safety or positioning. It just knows how to get that result, but not necessarily how you want to be perceived in the market. Even with some of the experiments I've ran using the Meta AI creative, is that some of those results can be particularly wild. You can take an apple juice product and then it can put it into some fluorescent green bottle with someone drinking it. That doesn't look anything like the product, but apparently the AI thinks that is the version which is going to sell the best, which then opens up concerns around, okay, are you accurately representing your product? Is that misrepresentation? And what does that expose you to? Those are questions which are not answered just yet, but hopefully should be answered in the fullness of time, because I believe that many governments are looking at this. But it's concerning that when a human no longer actually has control, or your brand loses control, you lose all elements of brand safety about what could be potentially shown if things are being customized to appeal to a certain person. Knowing how well the Meta platforms are at targeting people based on your interests, what if it takes your product and molds it in such a way and markets it to someone with very, very extreme views? Is that going to be brand safe? Is that going to be representative about your brand? Or do you just not care? Because that's just going to be a sale, and that's ultimately what you want, so it's okay. Me being a little bit old school potentially in my thinking is that you do want to maintain some level of brand safety with this, that you want to make sure that your ads, your creative, your brand is not put in a position where it is going to be flexing to appeal to a certain audience who you may have absolutely no interest in, all in the name of chasing a particular result. And that's something we absolutely do not want. So while this would give smaller brands who lack that creative ability to create ads at some level of scale, you have to think about what the net benefit could actually be from this and what the potential outcomes could be if you give all control over to Meta's AI, all in the name of getting better results. So that's really something which we need to dive into more as this starts to be known about this whole infinite creative strategy, and allow us to actually test it. Because while I've been playing around with a lot of different AI, 99% of the times, I would not actually use that creative in an ad, because I want my brand to be distinct. I want my brand to stand out and reflect the values which I have set for that particular brand. And while I believe that the actual production of ads and some of the what used to be termed the macro operator work could actually be handed over to an AI, the core essence of what it means to be a brand which is strategy, brand development, can't be lost. And we need to make sure that we retain that. Whereas other work, such as reformatting a video for a certain size, that's stuff which I'm happy for that to go to an AI, because that doesn't actually require any human intuition or skill or thought or insight which goes into that. So I really am keen to see what happens with this over the next few weeks and months. If anyone knows anything or anyone has any thoughts, would love to hear them as well. Now, finally, going into our last story of today, which is going to be about Australia Post. And Australia Post have made a bit of a wave over the last couple of weeks. So everything with the tariffs, there was a lot of brands who have been panicking about what they're going to be doing in this space, given that for the most part, we were all expecting that all goods shipped into America from Australia, if they were manufactured in China, would have to be country of origin China, which meant at a minimum, it would be 145% tariff. With the rest of the world, if goods were manufactured anywhere else, only 10%. Turns out that Australia Post have found that that's not quite the case, and they've clarified this for a lot of brands. I admit, when I first heard it, I was fairly skeptical about how true this actually was. It sounded just too good to be true. But through advice coming from Australia Post themselves, they have confirmed that any products being shipped from Australia, regardless of which country they were manufactured in, can be declared as country of origin Australia. But not just that, the de minimis of USD $800 still applies for Australian originating goods. So you can still ship, for the most part, your parcels into America with only a 10% tariff. Now that is really, really good news for brands. Brands who were seeing that their prices would potentially have to increase 200, 300, 400%. Are now able to continue selling with only a minor markup if they choose to, or they can just choose to absorb it and just show the tariffs at checkout. So we're seeing that a lot of brands in the last couple of weeks are very rapidly reversing course and putting the US back on the radar. And rather than continue to push into other markets, which I would still recommend doing, are looking at how can we continue to shore up and go back into the US market for a couple of reasons. Number one is that US, if you're already there, you've already got a presence there. So it's much easier to start back up in that market if you've already been advertising there for the last couple of years. The second part is that a lot of US advertisers and retailers have actually pulled out of that market and are withdrawing from that market. Shein and Temu, like we've talked about before, have significantly reduced their ad spend, although I believe Shein have started advertising again. But many US brands who do import their products from America, they are the ones who are going to be hit the hardest and are being hit the hardest with the 145% tariffs, of which there's still no word what's actually happening, if that's going to continue or whether that could be revised. But for the moment, though, there's a lot of US retailers who do not have stock coming in from China and are put in a very, very vulnerable position, which is an opportunity for Australian retailers to fill that void, because if they don't have the products there, this is an opportunity where we could sell those products in there. So something to really think about, and some further advice from Australia Post is that you do need to make sure that you do prepare your online customs forms and you are fully EAD compliant. So ensuring that you do have country of origin Australia, but also the item description is as detailed as it possibly can be, and also making sure you are using the correct HS codes when you are shipping over there. So just some fairly standard advice, which you probably should have been doing already when you were sending into the US. But now with this announcement from Australia Post, it appears that we're able to almost go back to business as usual. Now, some further tips if you're wondering about how you should leverage it is that if you are going to be adding the tariffs, I strongly recommend adding the tariffs at the checkout rather than making it part of your price. The main reason for this is that we want to make it really clear to the customer that this is not something which we have chosen to do. This is something which has been put upon us, same as potentially a VAT or a GST, where we don't want to necessarily put that on the price, or we want to make sure that we add something on there to show that there may be tariffs. And then when they're at the checkout, that's when they see it, and you can make it really clear that this is a tariff. This means that the blowback doesn't come on you, but the blowback is very much front and center for the US government to take account for. So that's just some really quick advice there, some really good news for retailers who have been rethinking their strategies with the recent tariffs announcements, now able to get back into the US. So as we wrap up this episode. I will be in Singapore next week. I will be over there chairing ETAL Asia. I'll be chairing day one and then on a couple of panels on day two, but also be over there visiting a few other brands as well. So really excited for that. Singapore is where I was born, so it's always a welcome pleasure to go back home. And then later on this month, I will be at Retail Fest. So from the 28th to 30th, I believe I'm going to be taking part in a number of sessions there. So if you are going to be there, please reach out. Would love to catch up with you. It's going to be a great few days over there. And also this week as well. This actually will come out after this, but there will be the Retail Fest Roadshow here in Adelaide at the Saracen's Head. So hopefully by this time, I would have caught up with a few of you. So it's been yet another super busy week with a lot of challenges and opportunities coming for retailers, both from the political side, but also with some changes with what's happening with the tariffs. So with that in mind, keep selling, keep innovating, and keep growing. And I'll see you all next week on This Week in E-commerce.